bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. I'm asking for a quick prayer, and you can pray for me by singing along with me, gesturing at your screen, and hitting the dislike button on this video. Let's sing it again. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Okay, I would like you guys to please pray for me. And the reason I want you to pray for me is when I look back, I feel very scorned that the future that was promised to me has not materialized in the way that I had thought. Let's go back in time a little bit. When I was 16 years old, I was going to college part time, and that year I really cleaned up my eating habits. I quit drinking soda that year, and I was really proud of that fact. And I remember thinking 30 years from now, when I think back at the day I quit drinking soda, I want to feel free from soda. I never treated it like I was giving up anything. I treated it like freedom from soda. The reason I quit drinking soda was there was a girl in the classroom that I liked, but I was overweight and I needed to lose some weight first before I made my move on her. I never made the move on her though. You can think of her as Kelly Clarkson. That's the kind of girl she was. Instead, I ended up making a move on a distant cousin of Mary Curry, and my parents were not very happy with that. This was in the early 2000s when prejudice against interracial relationships like that was still somewhat acceptable in our society, right? At the time, it was perfectly okay to be against gay marriage and all that fun stuff, right? And so I cleaned up my eating habits. Unfortunately, 3 years later, I got really deathly ill with eczema. In fact, I still have a scar on my leg. I think I shot a couple videos one time. I still have a huge scar on my leg from the time when I was dealing with eczema. And during that time, I got some testing and I learned that I am severely allergic to milk products. And ever since avoiding milk, I've gotten even more sensitive to it to the point that I have to be, even when I come out to public, this is a Whole Foods cafeteria. I got to be very careful about touching surfaces here. Um, and actually, part of the reason I love Taiwan is that very few foods have. When I go to a restaurant and I bring up milk allergy, people will laugh at me like, "Who eats any milk product?" And then the second thing they ask me is how my life is in the United States because they know that's where I must be coming from, right? And I would have thought if you had asked me back in 2003 what life would be like in 2020, I would have assumed that people would be very understanding of needing to take care of health, right? I would never have imagined that going to work and commenting that my colleague having to distance myself from my colleague who's eating or from one of our clients who is eating would have generated so much toxicity. I would have never guessed that. Now, here's an interesting statistic. I tried to look this up, but I couldn't get an answer. We all know about racial pay bias and gender bias. I wonder how much less money the typical person with a food allergy is making compared to somebody who doesn't have a food allergy. Apples for apples compared. If you control for everything else, education, gender, race, if you want, all the other things that you can control for, I guarantee it's probably on par with some of those other gaps, right? Just my own experience. Um, it's one of those things you can hide until you can't, right? If you work anywhere where food might be available, at one point or another, you have to tell it, right? You might not necessarily have to tell your colleague that you're in remission from cancer. You don't have to tell your colleague you have uh, any sort of condition that you could control, right? So I had a colleague who had type 1 diabetes, and wouldn't have known until he told me, right? And it's just one of those things. And once you tell somebody, it also creates, I don't think, so part of the reason that I'm getting all this prejudice, I don't think it's because I don't think it's because these people hate people with food allergies. No, they just have too much going on, right? So at the tutoring center, obviously, some kids actually want to learn their SAT or whatever they're studying, and they love their food. They can't put it down, right? Whether you want to call it they love their food or maybe they have a borderline addiction, whatever it is, they're motivated at their food and they want to come study the SAT. Or some kids are prisoner in the tutoring center, right? Their parents are dragging them in and they're watching the clock. 30 minutes until I get released, 20 minutes until I get released, right? That's some students. And when they hear they can get their tutor to distance away from them by eating whatever food, that becomes a go-to plan when they get when they get bored of their tutor. Oh, I'm going to bring out my weapon, right? Almost like they have a weapon that they could bring into the classroom, right? So some students probably do treat it that way, right? And then the boss, he looks at customer service and he looks at the fact that because I have these allergies, he has to think about it, right? Maybe the boss even wants to bring in food from time to time, right? Throw a pizza party. Oh, now he can't because of this. And it becomes an extra burden. It becomes something that the kids get, it interferes with the kids' learning. And it's just sucky all around. I would have thought 20 years ago, if you had asked me what life would look like 20 years from now in terms of food allergies, I would have thought we would have resolved this. One thing that would be really helpful is if kids could learn, whether it be in their health class or just general education, that it is not socially acceptable when you have food on your hands to dust it everywhere. I don't know why that isn't taught, right? We all learn to wash our hands. We all learn that we should brush our teeth. We all learn that we cover your mouth when you sneeze. I'll let you think about what other hygiene we learn about, right? But why not that? Hey, uh, keep your food to your area. Be mindful about all your crumbs, right? I think I know why that is not part of the public health curriculum, because that would require people to think about what they're eating. The food industrial complex thrives on people not thinking and shoveling food into their mouth, right? I'll do an exercise. Write down. Here's a pop quiz. What you eat yesterday? Can you give me a list? Okay. Now today, actually record what you eat for one day and compare those two. I guarantee there are a lot of things that were subconsciously swallowed, right? And the food industry thrives on that. It thrives on it. All right. The other reason I want you to pray for me is that my this month will mark when I did the calculation 10 half-lives of polonium 210 since I began my art project. I have a different measurement of time. And I'm very disappointed at what it has brought me versus what I was kind of promised all those half-lives of polonium 210 ago. You see, I love making the art and I love interacting with customers, but there's a lot of headache that goes on top of all of that. So, for example, I have a storage unit for my art. I'm finally going to get a chance to clean it up because the weather is nice, right? Every time I go to the storage locker during the summertime, I feel like I might die in there. I might collapse, heat stroke, and nobody will know I'm in there. I often one time I was in there and my cell phone battery was dying, and I made sure to get out of there before my cell phone battery completely died, right? Because I never know if something's going to happen that's going to require me to call for help. And long story short, it feels like every time I go there, there's a time crunch, and the end result is that the storage locker becomes a minor disaster, right? And I finally get a chance, hopefully this weekend, to go clean it up. But that was not something that was part of the package that was quote unquote promised to me when I began my art career. Also, what not promised to me was all the pain of moving all these heavy boxes at the art show every first Friday. Parking is at least a mile from where everything is set up, and I'm all on my own, right? I can't just set up and leave everything unattended there, right? And so that was not something that I thought of. So I'm just really jaded by these. What always starts out really beautiful. Oh, freedom from all that junk food and a new direction in career. It always starts so shiny, and then everything quickly tarnishes just as soon as just as the new shiny object appears, it tarnishes quickly. And so that's why I need you guys to pray for me. And you can pray for me by singing along with me, gesturing at your screen, and hitting the dislike on this video. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum.